It was a cold Friday night when my phone rang. You know that eerie feeling when you don't expect a call, and suddenly, it feels like everything stops? That was me when I saw Mike's name light up on my screen. We hadn't hung out in months. Work had taken him away, something about working with the city's surveillance cameras. But tonight, his voice was different. Dark, like a storm cloud that's been gathering for far too long. "Come over," he muttered. "I've got drinks. And I need to talk." By the time I got to his place, Mike was already several drinks in, slurring his words like I'd never heard before. His usual upbeat self was gone. Something was weighing him down, heavily. "What's going on, man?" I asked, sipping my drink, trying to cut through the tension that filled the room like fog. Mike glanced at the floor, his voice dropping into a low, almost trembling tone. "It's work." I had no idea what he really did at his job, beyond dealing with the city's CCTV footage. "Just watch this," he said, leading me to a cluttered room filled with monitors, hard drives, and stacks of DVDs. He fumbled with some cables, plugged in a drive, and hit play. On the largest screen, black and white footage from a downtown street appeared. The clock in the corner read 3 a.m., and everything was quiet. The street was empty at first. Then, from the shadows, a woman emerged, stumbling into the frame. She was alone, or so it seemed. As she reached the middle of the intersection, her head jerked violently to the left, and she screamed, though no one else was visible. Mike cut to another camera angle, showing her sprinting across the street, glancing back over her shoulder in pure terror. But no one was there. Nothing. Just her running. The footage switched again. This time, a wide shot showed her collapsing in the middle of the road, cowering as if something was standing over her. But there was nothing I could see at least. And then, the impossible happened. Her body lifted off the ground, floating like a puppet with invisible strings. She rose higher, her limbs hanging limp, as if some force had wrapped itself around her neck and hoisted her into the air. Then, in one swift gut-wrenching motion, her head snapped to the side, and she fell to the ground like a rag doll. The screen went black. I sat there, unable to speak. My pulse was pounding in my ears, but my mind was racing with questions. "That's not possible," I finally managed to stammer. "What did I just see?" Mike stared at the screen, shaking his head. "That's just the beginning. There's more." And with that, he clicked to the next video, his hand trembling as it hovered over the mouse. This one was labeled Black Crab. The footage started in an underground subway station. The night vision camera flickered on, showing the long, deserted platform. For a while, there was nothing but the grainy green glow of the empty station. Then, movement. At first, it was just a shadow, crawling out from the dark tunnel. My heart leapt into my throat as I realized what I was looking at. It was a person, no, a man, but he wasn't walking. He was scuttling. Like a crab, his back arched, stomach facing the ceiling, moving on all fours with jerky, unnatural speed. Mike fast-forwarded through the footage, showing the man-thing scurrying upstairs, squeezing through locked gates, and disappearing into the shadows outside the station. "What the hell is that?" I gasped. "They call him the Black Crab," Mike whispered. "But it gets worse." He skipped to another part of the footage. The crab walker was back, dragging something out of the woods, something small, limp. A cat, maybe? He clamped the animal's tail between his teeth and crawled back into the station. The next shot showed him returning an hour later, this time dragging something much larger. A body. Human. Mike paused the video. His eyes were hollow, haunted by whatever he'd seen on those screens over the past few months. "This isn't just some lunatic," he said, voice cracking. "They think he was once a man, David Fletcher. A lawyer who lost his family in a house fire. He snapped, disappeared, and this is what's left of him." I didn't know what to say. My stomach twisted into knots. "And the cops? What did they do?" "They've been covering it up," Mike muttered. "The footage. It's locked away in a classified archive. They can't explain it, so they hide it." I felt the weight of what he was telling me. The enormity of it. These things, these horrors, they were real, and they were happening in the shadows, right under our noses. And that's when Mike pulled out the final hard drive. His hands shook as he plugged it in. "They call this one Cloud Mirror." The footage was of 5 different intersections across the city. All empty, all quiet, until strange orbs of light began to appear. At first, they were the size of bowling balls, hovering just above the ground. But then they started to grow, pulsing with an eerie glow, until they were the size of a car. And then, people appeared. Drunk, wandering out of bars, they stumbled towards the orbs, mesmerized. One by one, They walked into the glowing clouds and vanished. Moments later they reappeared. But they were different. Their movements were stiff, synchronized, like puppets on strings. "They're replacing people," Mike whispered, his voice barely audible. "Whatever those clouds are, they're taking people, and something else is coming back in their place." I felt a chill crawl up my spine, icy fingers gripping my every nerve. This is insane," I said. "We need to tell someone." Mike just shook his head, staring at the final shot on the screen, a middle-aged couple entering one of the clouds. When they emerged, the husband, who had been limping, was walking perfectly fine. "That's my boss," Mike said, his voice hollow. "And his wife." My stomach churned. I wanted to vomit, scream, run. Anything to get away from that room, from the screens, from the truth of what I had just seen. But Mike's words hung in the air, choking me with the weight of what they meant. His boss, replaced by whatever had come out of that cloud. What did that even mean? "You can't keep this to yourself," I blurted out, my voice cracking. "If your boss was replaced, they'll come for you too. They won't just let you walk away with this footage." Mike stared at the darkened screen, his hands gripping the edge of his desk. "I know. I'm already in too deep." He paused, taking a long, shaky breath. "I'm meeting with him tomorrow." His voice was so calm, so resigned, like he had already accepted his fate. "What are you going to do?" I asked, barely able to get the words out. Mike turned to me, eyes hollow, and said something I'll never forget. "I think they know. I think they've been watching me, like they're waiting for me to slip up. If I don't go to that meeting tomorrow, they'll come for me anyway. If I do go," he trailed off, not needing to finish the sentence. We sat in silence for what felt like hours. My mind raced, trying to piece together a plan. I couldn't just leave him. He was my friend, and if what he said was true, none of us were safe. Finally, I stood up, my voice shaking but determined. "We're going to the police, Mike. This is bigger than you, bigger than me. They have to know." Mike looked at me with a mix of relief and fear. "You don't get it, do you? The police already know. I've seen their cars parked near these intersections. They're watching the footage too, but they're not doing anything about it. Why do you think none of this has come out? They're either in on it, or they're too scared to do anything." I froze. My chest tightened as the gravity of his words sank in. If the police were involved, or if they were being controlled by whatever had replaced his boss, there was nowhere to go. No one to trust. But I refused to give up. We need evidence. Hard evidence. More than just the footage. Something that'll force them to take action. Mike nodded slowly, as if an idea was forming in his mind. "There's one more place I haven't checked yet. It's deep in the city's archive system, beyond where I'm allowed to go. But if we can get in, we might find something they haven't buried yet." My heart pounded in my chest as the reality of what we were about to do set in. This was no longer about watching creepy videos. We were about to break into a classified government archive, and I knew deep down that if we got caught, we wouldn't be coming out alive. The next night, Mike and I drove to the city's tech department. It was after midnight, the streets deserted, eerily quiet. Mike had access to the building, but we had to be careful. He told me the security system would log every door we opened, every camera that caught us. If his boss, or whatever had replaced him, was watching, they'd know we were inside. We slipped in through a side entrance, Mike's keycard giving us access. The hallways were empty, the fluorescent lights flickering slightly overhead. My nerves were on edge, every sound amplified in the silence. Mike led me to a door at the end of the hall. "This is it," he whispered, swiping his card again. The door clicked open, revealing a room full of servers, cables snaking across the floor. At the back of the room was a small locked door. "That's where they keep the classified archives," Mike said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll need a few minutes to hack the lock." As Mike worked, I stood watch, my eyes darting nervously down the hallway. Every creak, every flicker of light, set my heart racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that something was lurking in the shadows, waiting for us to make a mistake. After what felt like an eternity, there was a soft click, and the door swung open. Inside, rows of hard drives lined the walls, each labeled with a code I didn't recognize. "This is it," Mike whispered, his hands shaking as he pulled out one of the drives. "This is where they keep the real footage." He plugged the drive into a nearby computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The screen flickered to life, showing folder after folder of surveillance videos. But these were different. These were marked with red labels, the word classified stamped across each one. Mike selected a file at random and hit play. The footage was grainy black and white, just like before. But this time, the camera was inside a police station. Officers milled about, chatting casually, when the door to the station burst open. A man stumbled inside, drenched in sweat, his eyes wide with terror. He was ranting, incoherent, about the clouds and people being replaced. The officers tried to calm him down, but the man kept screaming, pointing at the door like something was chasing him. Suddenly, the footage glitched. The man froze mid-scream, his body jerking unnaturally, like a marionette whose strings had been cut.
And then, he changed.
His face distorted, his limbs twisted at impossible angles, and his eyes. Oh God, his eyes were completely black. He turned to the officers, who had backed away in horror, and lunged. The footage cut off abruptly. I couldn't breathe. My entire body felt numb. This is what they've been hiding, Mike whispered, his voice shaking. This is what's been happening to people. We didn't have time to process it. Suddenly, the door behind us slammed shut, and a low rumbling voice filled the room. You shouldn't have come here. I spun around, my heart in my throat. Standing in the doorway was a man in a dark suit, Mike's boss. Or at least, whatever was left of him. His eyes were black. His movements stiff, unnatural, like the people in the footage. And behind him, more figures began to emerge from the shadows. Police officers, all with the same vacant, soulless eyes. They had come for us. Mike grabbed my arm, pulling me towards the back of the room. We have to go now. We ran, bursting through a side door and into the hallway. I could hear them behind us, their footsteps echoing through the empty building, getting closer. This way. Mike shouted, leading me towards the exit. My lungs burned, my legs aching, but I kept running. I could feel them right behind me, their presence like a cold shadow creeping up my spine. Just as we reached the door, I felt a hand brush against my back. I stumbled, nearly falling, but Mike yanked me through the door, slamming it shut behind us. We didn't stop running until we were back in the car, the city lights blurring around us as we sped down the empty streets. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say. I glanced over at Mike, his face pale, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. We're not safe, I whispered, more to myself than to him. They're everywhere. Mike didn't respond. He didn't have to. We both knew the truth. Whatever those things were, they weren't going to stop until they had all of us. We raced through the empty streets, shadows chasing us in the rearview mirror. Cold sweat clung to my skin, and every breath felt like fire in my lungs. Mike's knuckles were white, gripping the steering wheel as if it were the only thing keeping him tethered to reality. They're not going to stop, I muttered, my voice barely audible over the roar of the engine. They'll find us. Mike didn't respond. His face was pale, eyes fixed on the road, but I could see the fear etched into every line of his expression. We both knew the truth. We were running on borrowed time. Suddenly, Mike jerked the car into an alleyway, slamming the brakes. We can't go home. They'll be waiting, he said, his voice a trembling whisper. There's only one place left. He turned the car toward the industrial outskirts of the city, a part of town no one ever visited after dark. I didn't ask where we were going. I knew it didn't matter anymore. We were just delaying the inevitable. We pulled up to an abandoned warehouse, the kind of place that screamed don't enter, but it didn't matter now. We were desperate. The only light came from a flickering street lamp, casting long shadows across the entrance. Mike killed the engine, and for a moment, the silence was deafening. We need to figure out what to do, Mike said, staring out at the darkened building. We can't keep running. Do you really think we can stop this? I asked, my voice breaking. The police, the people in charge, they're all gone, Mike. Whatever those things are, they've taken over. Mike slammed his fist against the dashboard. There has to be something. We've got the footage, we know what's happening. I looked at him, feeling a wave of hopelessness crash over me. But no one will believe us. And even if they did, what then? How do you fight something like this? Mike didn't have an answer. He just stared out into the dark, his breath coming in shallow gasps. A sudden noise snapped us both back to reality. A faint scraping sound, like metal against concrete, coming from inside the warehouse. We froze. What the hell was that? I whispered, my pulse quickening. Mike shook his head slowly, eyes wide. We're not alone. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline surging through my veins. We need to go. Now. But before we could move, the scraping sound grew louder, closer. It was coming from behind the warehouse doors, doors that now began to creak open. Something was there. A figure, tall and lanky, stepping out from the shadows. Its movements were stiff, jerky, like a puppet on strings. And then I saw its eyes, black, empty, just like the others. It wasn't alone. More figures emerged behind it, all moving with that same unnatural, horrific precision. Mike and I scrambled out of the car, but it was too late. They were already surrounding us, closing in. "This can't be happening," I muttered, backing up against the car, my body trembling with fear. "We're trapped." Mike stood next to me, his eyes darting between the approaching figures.
"We fight," he whispered.
"It's the only option left." Before I could respond, one of the creatures lunged forward, its arm swinging toward Mike. He ducked just in time, grabbing a rusted pipe from the ground and swinging it with all his might. The sound of metal colliding with flesh echoed in the night, but the thing barely flinched.
"They're not human,"
Mike shouted, swinging again, this time connecting with its head. The creature staggered, but it didn't fall. I felt a surge of terror.
This was it.
This was how it was going to end. They were going to take us, replace us, just like they'd done with everyone else. And then, in the chaos, I remembered something.
The footage. The clouds.
Whatever they were, they seemed to control these things. Maybe, just maybe, they were the key.
"Mike!"
I shouted, trying to be heard over the chaos.
"The clouds."
"We need to find the cloud." Mike looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but there was no time for questions. "What the hell are you talking about?"
"The clouds.
"The orbs that turned people into this." I yelled, swinging wildly at one of the creatures as it came too close. "Maybe if we destroy whatever they are, we can stop this." Mike hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "There's an intersection not far from here, the one where we saw it last time. We'll have to risk it." We fought our way to the car, barely dodging the creatures that surrounded us. They were slow but relentless, their empty eyes fixed on us as we peeled out of the alleyway and back onto the road. The intersection was empty when we arrived, just like in the footage. The streetlights flickered weakly, casting an eerie glow over the pavement.
And then, we saw it. The orb.
It hovered in the middle of the street, pulsating with that strange, otherworldly light. I felt a shiver run down my spine just looking at it. "What now?" Mike asked, his voice tense. "I don't know," I admitted, my heart pounding in my chest. "But we have to try something." We stepped out of the car, slowly approaching the orb. The air around it felt heavy, like it was charged with electricity. As we got closer, I could feel it pulling at me, like it was trying to draw me in. "No!" I shouted, fighting the urge to move closer. "We can't let it take us." Mike grabbed a rock from the ground and hurled it at the orb. It passed right through, disappearing into the light without a sound. "Damn it!" he cursed, grabbing another rock. I watched, heart in my throat, as he threw it with all his strength.
This time, something changed.
The orb flickered, just for a moment, its glow dimming slightly.
"That's it!" I shouted.
"We need to keep hitting it." We grabbed whatever we could find, rocks, metal scraps, anything, and started throwing them at the orb. Each hit caused it to flicker, to weaken. And then, with one final strike, it collapsed in on itself, vanishing into thin air. For a moment, everything was still. The street was silent, the air suddenly lighter. But then, I heard it. The sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate. I turned, heart sinking as I saw them, the creatures.
They were still coming.
"It didn't work," Mike whispered, his voice hollow. "We're too late." "No," I said, shaking my head. "It's not over." And then I saw it. The blackness in their eyes was fading slowly but surely. Whatever control the clouds had over them was weakening. They were slowing down, stumbling, as if waking from a nightmare. "We did it," I breathed, barely believing it myself. Mike stood beside me, staring in disbelief as the creatures, once human, now something else, began to collapse one by one. "We need to get out of here," he said quietly. I nodded, my body numb with exhaustion and fear. We climbed back into the car and drove away, the last remnants of that strange hellish night fading in the rearview mirror. But even as the city lights began to blur around us, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. That whatever we'd seen, whatever we'd fought, it was still out there, lurking in the shadows. And it was only a matter of time before it came back.